seeing is a classic fascist grouping in many countries. What do I mean by a fascist grouping? What I mean is a kind of corrupt party or leader telling the Christian conservatives, the evangelicals in the country, that he will get their agenda done for them, telling the big business interests, especially the petrocarbon industry, that he will make sure that no climate change legislation happens. We're finding a very typical and standard, back to Nazi Germany, link up against labor movements, where the corrupt leader or party is saying to businesses, "We'll take care of your labor union problem. We'll make sure you can keep on polluting the environment, exploiting your workers," and then telling the evangelicals, the LGBT community is a dire threat to your children. Then we're seeing in the United States, we're seeing increased anti-Semitism, which is predictable. We've been having many years of dog-whistling anti-Semitism. So this fascist grouping of religious nationalists, together with big business, behind an autocratic leader who's representing democracy's liberties as an existential threat.
The long tail for this will be the greed. Greed will be the undoing of the. It's greed that's causing them to do this interference in the first place.
Yeah,
They don't care about the impacts on others. They are greedy. They're voracious, and they extract. It's an extractive mentality. They're extracting from society. They're extracting from culture. They're extracting from politics. They're mining their way through things, and they're leaving a waste trail that's relatively easy to follow.
It was having my bank account hacked. It was having my game studio targeted by sabotaging the ratings of the things we were selling. It was just absolute total war. It was hunting me as a person.
Right.
And, obviously you can't go through something like that and not have PTSD. It had horrible effects on my marriage. It had horrible effects on my game studio. So, it really was swear to God war. And what is so disheartening about that is many of the people involved in Gamergate, Steve Bannon, Milo Yiannopoulos, Mike Ceranovich, all of these people went on to become formally part of the Trump administration. Jesus Christ. You saw QAnon. QAnon happened because of 8chan. 8chan happened directly because of Gamergate. So basically, you had all these people take the formula of Gamergate and then use it on national politics.
The pattern, unfortunately, that seems to underlie a lot of the most enthusiastic Russian propagandists is that they have been dealing with severely damaged personalities and personal failure for most of their lives. In fact, the overlap between the number of Russian propagandists who also turn out to be convicted sex offenders is absolutely startling. There are some deep-seated fundamental personality flaws that actually predispose people to being available to be made use of by Russia. And if you look back at the KGB handbooks for recruiting agents of influence, agents of subversion, or indeed propagandists, then you can see very clearly that Russia understood the misfits make the good targets, the people with a grudge, the people who feel they've been treated unfairly by the world because they've been consistent failures, and therefore seek revenge. And you can see that revenge coming through so strongly in some of the verbal attacks that you hear from the trolls, from the so-called independent journalists, the ones pushing the Russian propaganda lines, because the bile and the vitriol and the hatred that they pour out when they're talking about people who criticize Russia It's extremely personal, and it's plainly tapping deeply into their own personality defects.
And I want to thank you because you are among the people who are actually pointing out Lieutenant General Mike Flynn as you talk about Vatnik Soup. And how did he come on your radar?
I think it was through when I was looking into the gray zone. So this infamous 2015 dinner, which was attended by several people from the United States, including Michael Flynn and Jill Stein, for example. So it was kind of suspicious to see influential American people dining with Vladimir Putin after the annexation of Crimea, after the Skripal poisoning, after all this. So it was like unbelievable. How is this happening? So I started digging deeper, and there's a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, I think we can all agree that Mike Flynn is a very interesting character in a sense, like he's in these Russian networks, but also in Turkey.
I'm going to explain how Mike Flynn stole the 2016 election from Hillary Clinton in 2 minutes. You can find all the references at the link below. Why did this guy become president? This guy wanted him to be. Genocidal neo-Nazi Alexander Dugin is also known as Putin's brain. He created Putin's imperialist strategy, which is being carried out in Ukraine right now. The strategy is called Eurasianism, which means Russia will control all of Europe and Asia, with Moscow as the third Rome. Key to this strategy is the country of Turkey. In 2015, Dugin ran an operation to compromise a Turkish general and gain influence over Turkish President Erdogan. In July 2016, Erdogan and Dugin orchestrated a false flag coup that gave Erdogan an excuse to crack down on his political opponents, including Fethullah Gulen, who has lived in the United States since 1999. They falsely accused Gulen of orchestrating the coup. The Turkish general then became a mouthpiece for Dugin and Putin. His name is Ismail Haki Pekin. Pekin worked for Flynn Intel Group through a guy named Bijan Kian, who was indicted for conspiracy in 2018 with this guy, Hekem Altekin, who was a direct contractor to the Russian government and set up a company specifically to run operations on behalf of Erdogan. That company, called Innovo, paid Mike Flynn more than $500,000 for services rendered at the end of 2015. $28,000 of that money went to this guy, ex-FBI agent Brian McCauley. One of the things McCauley did was tell a false story about Hillary Clinton's emails. Politico and the Post dutifully broadcast the lie. This led to a pressure campaign on James Comey, who made the catastrophic decision to reopen Hillary's email investigation 11 days before the election, costing her the presidency. Arrest Mike Flynn.
You have taught me not to ask binary questions when it comes to the why of Russia. Can you please just give me a great summary line that I can take back to, our various communities on that, so people can stop being so shocked at the bad behavior that continues?
The great question of why is Russia? I think it's something we talked about in our last conversation that is one of the keys to understanding what we're up against. People think of Russia as a threat from our time, a threat from possibly outside our area geographically, but nonetheless existing in the same century as us. If instead you consider Russia as a state which is from the middle of the last millennium, think of it as a state that behaves like it was in the 1500s and hasn't developed since then, either as a state or socially, particularly in the relationship between the leader and the country and its subjects, then so much more of what Russia does whether it's in its international relations, whether it's the way it treats other countries, whether it's the way ordinary Russians are capable of behaving when they arrive in Ukraine and commit atrocities against the people that are supposed to be their fraternal Slavs. It all makes so much more sense if you think of it as a society which simply has not evolved in the same way as others over the last few hundred years.
This information is just hack after hack after hack of people who don't believe in science, who believe too much in religion, etc. How do we upgrade our system? How do we patch our system to stop these vulnerabilities?
It's really tough, right? Because you're talking about 10,000-year-old wetware, right?
Yeah.
Our brains really, this is really, really old software, right? And it's not getting upgraded fast enough at all.
It's looking at the lions and looking at
Yeah, look, I mean, I grew up with like marketing textbooks in the house because my mom, worked in that field. And so I had a sense of all of the psychological techniques and tactics that are used in the field of like marketing and just direct advertising to get people to do things, to modify behavior. I read an incredible book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. I recommend that to everyone. And again, it goes back to folks not really understanding how sophisticated these operations really are, not realizing that there are, again, like not just buildings full of regular people, but academics, people with PhDs who literally study brains for a living, who study behavior for a living, who are sociologists, psychologists, neuroscientists, right? Every different type of human related discipline that you can imagine. There are people out there who are being paid to kind of like hack our cognition. So what's the defense for Bannon's strategy of essentially flooding the zone with shit, as he says, right? How do you defend against that? One, you have to stop taking in all the shit. You have to stop responding to all the shit, right?
Yes.
And so how do you stop Tucker Carlson from broadcasting that evil into the minds of people? You can't, but you can maybe substitute it with something else.
But we have to be honest with the public and say, yes, the mind can be hacked. Here's how we do it. I'm going to add one more thing that I discovered just a few weeks ago, which was a Go Army PSYOPs recruitment video. I'm not kidding. By the U.S. Army. Come and join, because we're in a new level of warfare, psychological. Learn how to deceive the enemy.
Right.
But why don't we just tell the public, hey, we know these techniques. Here's how to protect yourself. We need to enforce regulations and legislate platforms who have been infiltrated by traitors like Mike Flynn and foreign actors like Putin's intelligence agencies and Xi and a bunch of other tyrants. Let's be honest. And so back to the I got out, the most powerful thing is people sharing their stories to normalize it. And look at all the documentaries and stories being told about mind control cults. The problem with all these, they're not explaining the bite model and the influence continuum in a way that will help protect people or help inoculate and help people to step back and reality test. So we have a lot to do, and activists who care should organize together. And this is going to be a multi-year. It's not going to be something we can do just till the midterms or just till the 2024 elections. But of course, we have to focus on making sure we have a majority in the Senate and Congress, and maintain the White House so we can pass legislation to undo some of the deleterious decisions by the radicalized Supreme Court.
Here's my follow-up. How about regulation? Where are the laws?
Yeah.
Technology moves at the speed of light. Our regulation, our legislation moves at the speed of old white dudes.
I would say it's worse than that. And again, we get into this in the film. So I'd say our whole third act is about this very question. From my perspective, diving into this world, and I know you don't think this way, but I think it's giving Congress too much credit to just say they move slowly. There's so much dark money. There's so much lobbying.
We agree.
Power.
Yeah.
People, when you're dealing with a company the size of Google, it's not just the right that's getting bought. The left is getting bought. Everyone's being told to just shut up and sit on their hands. So there is no antitrust. There is no legislation being presented. There is no reform. There is no regulation. There's literally nothing happening. And when people of any magnitude or significance at the moment, and when people say, that there's going to be change, there's going to be regulation, or like, what can we do? That's the reason that I kind of bristle at these sort of quick fix ideas, like, oh, just tell your kids they can't be online. Because boy, is that doing these companies a giant favor. That's just like, it's like they're going to still be making, because the kids are absolutely going to keep getting online.
Yeah.
When it comes to these organized troll campaigns, which we have acknowledged occur, obviously we know that some of the worst come from 4chan, 8chan, 8kun, Kiwi Farms, Opie and Anthony forums, places like this. The Donald.win was mentioned in the January 6th committee hearings, right? What about shutting these online hives of iniquity and cesspools of white supremacy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not up to us to change this.
That's the right answer.
No, I love it. I love it.
That is the right answer. There's no subtle answer. Man, bang on. Thank you so much.
How does it come down to the individuals experiencing this that we're like, what can we do? I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, and I love it. We're having this conversation, and this is creating the narrative that they will finally listen and do something about it. We have to have these conversations, but it's not up to us to change it. Our power only goes so far.
Do you in your own community, are you already experiencing what we are experiencing here in America, where they keep picking people off? And what I mean by that is that, a friend of mine who 2 years ago completely believed in vaccines now has been brainwashed to think that they, they're dangerous. And there's all this disinformation through the internet infecting people's brains like a digital poison. And I don't know if you are seeing people that used to think, normally about things turn into like invasion of the body snatchers, or if you've seen any impacts like that.
Yeah, totally. There's songs on the new album that discusses that, where people have been swayed by the lure of conspiracy theories, of paranoia, but these people, they weren't saying fuck all 4 years ago. Along comes a vaccine to help people, and all of a sudden everyone's politicized. It's bullshit. So, I mean, the vaccine's just one thing. You've got culture wars. The kind of the cruelty directed towards the trans community currently in England is disgusting, and I've noticed it in this country as well.
They're treating the GOP as though it were a normal party. And what I'm trying to do is the theme of memory. Like, we can't just, memory hold the coup. The fact that it was a violent coup and they tried to assassinate Mike Pence as well as kill all kinds of Democratic lawmakers. And you're just going to forget this? Because that's when you have autocracy coming up, there's a huge work of memory repression or self-protective self-censorship. And I started writing about this in 2016, and I was giving talks saying you're going to be encouraged to forget.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Right.
Christianity's been used for hundreds of years to take people's property away from them, to murder them, to prevent science. I mean, look, you want to know why we've lost lots of our knowledge throughout history? Who burned down the library in Alexandria? who destroys knowledge over and over and over again. And if you look at many of our kind of grifting, Protestant preachers in the United States, these are uneducated morons who spend their entire intellectual energy in life trying to reinforce and validate ideas that they were told as children by their own parents who didn't know that much. I mean, that's a human tradition that goes back thousands of years. It's just they've learned to kind of weaponize it for politics.
How big of a part has this fucking dual narrative of reality and what is a paranoid fiction being sold played in, into this day that we have before us today?
I think pretty much everything around propaganda is about this, because propaganda is actually creating virtual reality around you just by two simple means: amount and repetition. So it's about the mere exposure effect. The more you get exposed to the lie or to the virtual reality they create, the more you get used to it. So first, when you hear it for the first time, it's a complete bullshit. When you hear it for the second time, you say, okay, it's a bullshit, but I've listened to this and sometimes before, and it's not that unknown like previously. Okay, let's put it aside, but I can think about it later. And so the completely false narrative, the trickstery, stays in your mental universe somehow on the orbit. And in the moments when you are not completely conscious, it's falling down to the center.
Shit.
Until one day you wake up and it's somehow part of your cognitive universe. You take it like, okay, it might be true, or I should probably think about it. Lots of people are talking about it, and the TV keeps repeating that. Opinion keepers keeps repeating that. So it's everything around you. And if the amount and repetition is constant and strong enough, a certain part of the population gets broken down.
Give you an example of how I see Russia and their propaganda way of thinking. Imagine you're in a bar, and you have a nice time with your friends, and you just having fun. And there is always a guy in the bar who is just staring at you, and he already want to fight with you, and everybody know it, and you can pretend he's not there. You can pretend like you're avoiding him, blah, blah, blah. But there is only two ways to solve this question. Or you ending your beautiful evening with friends and just leaving, which will be smart if you are able to do that. Or you need to fight this bully. There is only one chance to do it. And with Russia propaganda channels, you need to make them forbidden. It's lie. It's just lies. They're ruining the world. According to Aristotle, when you're saying lie, you're creating world which doesn't exist, and you put people into world which doesn't exist. So in one moment we'll realize that it was not true. They need to build their world from scratch, and that's why Dante put traitors in the worst place of hell, because they are creating a world which doesn't exist and force people to live in a world which doesn't exist.
We talked earlier about how HiFi, often has fought fire with fire. He's often used the techniques that these outrage, these people behind the outrage factories and those who are creating outrage junkies in America. He has used many of these tactics to psychologically fight back. And what do you think about that in the kind of the framework of war?
I think we all want to be good people and we all want to do the right thing. But when you're at war, all bets are off. If they're fighting with fire, you have to use more powerful fire. And they declared war on us like 40 years ago. And so I'm happy when somebody, and thankful to somebody like HiFi who can do stuff like that. Because why? We're not putting ourselves on a cross. We're not like doormats. We can't let ourselves be walked. We have to fight back.
Yeah.
And by any means necessary.
What can we in the West do to affect, change and to stop this horror from continuing?
I think that the answer is, for now, that Russia shows absolutely no sign of changing its behavior in this regard, nor of punishing troops who break laws. And therefore, the answer is the same answer to almost all things. Ukraine has to win the war. Russia has to be driven out of Ukraine. And I know it's not going to be easy. I know it's going to be awful, but simply the calls to say, well, we will allow Russia to continue to occupy parts of Ukrainian territory. If you do that, even aside from questions of the war that may flare up again, Russia may attack somebody else, may re-attack Ukraine in the future, you are condemning the people that are living in those territories to what is conceivably an ongoing genocide. And that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. And anybody who argues differently has lost their fucking mind.
Thank you for that. We could not have asked for more. I'll just end with something I also mentioned to Keir, that Yale professor Timothy Snyder, who wrote On Tyranny, said 100 years from now, should we still be around 100 years from now, the history books will reflect what they will write about during this time is the war in Ukraine. And that it's truly up to the West and to America whether or not this war is won. What can we tell Americans about why and how they need to support a swift end to this war?
We're really talking about the weirder end of the Republican Party, right? Because support is much higher amongst Democrats. And you tell them this. You tell them that this is the cheapest and easiest way to make America stronger, without any Americans dying, without Americans having to fight. You win this war, you weaken Russia. You enrich America. Life is better for you and your family. That's a strong message. And it's very self-interested. It's not a nice argument to have to make, right? Because the argument should be moral and it should be ethical. But that is not an argument that is, I think, going to cut through the Republican audience.
For almost a decade, if not longer. For days and weeks, if need be. Roger and Jack, thanks so much for having me on the show, and I hope you guys have a great evening. And of course, you can always find me talking on Truth Social.
So here's Roger last night at the Reawaken tour, and so let's take a listen to Roger.
No, next week you're going to see a kabuki theater in which General Flynn and I are both falsely accused solely on the basis of guilt by association of having anything to do with the January 6th illegality. So let me say it one more time, as I must. Any claim, assertion, or implication that I knew in advance about, that I was involved in, or that I condoned any illegal action on January 6th at the Capitol or at any other date on any other location is categorically false. And there is.
Oh, such whining and sadness.
Oh, hi. Thanks for checking in. I'm still a piece of garbage.
That he has a jar of Hitler farts next to his bed that he likes to crack the lid on every night before he goes to sleep, and he takes 3 big breaths of Hitler farts. And I found this out, right? And so what I did was I sent my ninjas to steal it from him, and I actually stole his. It says Die Furzi die Führer, which I guess is Hitler farts. And Brian Gamble, I've stolen your jar of Hitler farts.
Be careful with that, man. That's historical.
No. What I'm going to do is Hitler farts is I'm going to put it in a bag. I got his Hitler farts in a jar of Hitler farts in a bag, right? And I got a hammer.
No. And I'm
there we go. I've smashed your jar of Hitler farts, Brian.
You better seal that up, man. You better seal that
Oh,
up.
it's tight, dude. It's wrapped up. I've got like 4 bags and an absorbent carbon pad. All the stuff.
All I know is in Bavarian slang, the word for fart is Bumslassen.
Well, he doesn't have the Fuhrer's boom slapping whatever. Not anymore, Brian.
Oh my God!
You're done.
These people are so bad. These people are so.
Greatly at the hands of crazy people. So this was
I'm
my
actually
great
in
honor
the live
and play.
stream.
Thank you very
Oh
much.
my God! Thank you,
We
General
appreciate it
Flame.
very
You
much. Very
fucking
much.
idiot. Let's see if I can get on camera.